Hello and welcome to Redaction Report for this sweltering evening in the summer of discontent. Anyone living in Britain knows it's been quite a turbulent time right now. For anyone who's not from Britain, for our international audience, we're going to break down the happenings right now, shall we say. I'm joined by our good friend Tom Judge, and we're going to be talking about the big topic of the day. That is the Conservative Party leadership election. So for context, Boris Johnson, who's been Prime Minister since 2019, has been forced to resign after numerous scandals, and his cabinet basically reportedly brought an ultimatum to him and said, you got to go. And he did give the standard speech outside number 10 Downing Street and announced that a leadership election was going to be taking place. As per Conservative Party rules, several candidates put up their names to succeed Boris Johnson, and it's now been whittled down to two. Those are Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss. Now, Rishi Sunak was the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Britain's chief finance minister under Boris Johnson since 2020, dealt large sweeping bailout packages during the coronavirus pandemic, including the infamous Eat Out to Help Out scheme. Obviously, there was a lot of controversy around that. And Rishi Sunak, alongside Boris Johnson, was fined under the Partygate scandal, which I'm sure we'll be getting to in due course. Now, Liz Truss is Boris Johnson's foreign secretary since September of last year. And she is seen as an arch tax cutter. She's promising to cut taxes from day one if she comes to office. Rishi Sunak is more presenting himself as a fiscal conservative and trying to present himself as the more prudential candidate. Tom, what have you made of the race so far?
Well, it was a fun week. That first week where we had, was it 8 or 9 candidates to begin with?
It was quite a few.
And then it got whittled down every day. It's the best reality TV show that we've got in Britain. And we repeat it every 3 years, apparently. And it was very scattered at first. I think it became very apparent that Sunak would top the ballots within a couple of days. But who would come second and therefore go to the membership was highly contended. And we saw some figures that we'd not necessarily reckoned in like top of the party comes to the front a little bit more in Penny Mordaunt and Kemi Badenoch. If you follow politics, I'm sure you'll probably be aware of who they are, but to a more general public, they might not have heard those names before, and they were very prevalent for a few days. Penny Mordaunt just narrowly missing out on going to the membership by eight MPs, so very close in the end. She was in second place all the way up until the final ballot, although I think it had become clear that where the votes from the other MPs would likely go.
Yes, because we got there. Of course, Rishi Sunak, despite being an arch Brexiteer, is it fair to say, he voted Brexit. He's hardly worn it on his cuff, shall we say. He did vote for Brexit. At the same time, he's kind of become the favourite of Tory moderates. Well, Liz Truss was a Remainer, and in a previous decade or so was a Lib Dem. In fact, is now the favourite of the Tory right. Try getting your head around that one. And of course, the Tory right are trying to argue that Liz Truss has kind of, the zeal of the convert, shall we say. Do you buy that?
I'm not sure. Well, the membership buys it. The membership apparently buys it, and you do have the sort of hardline figures on the right. That famous interview now with Jacob Rees-Mogg and Nadine Dorries, who are obviously both seen as who have got wildly different personalities, but both come from a similar politics of the right.
Yes,
party. Both endorsed her very publicly. So I don't know if I buy that that's where her politics is. People can go on political journeys. People can change. as we've seen quite a lot of actually in British politics in the last few years. So potentially, maybe that's how she sees the way, not just to winning the membership, but to winning an election. Maybe she still thinks that sort of nationalistic fever will power her through, and therefore maybe she is in her heart of hearts a bit more moderate, a bit more of, because she came into Parliament in 2010, I believe. So you would have maybe expected to see him, and apparently was a Lib Dem. Maybe would have expected to see it more on that sort of liberal, socially liberal,
Well, she wasn't
Cameron-esque.
elected to Parliament as a Lib Dem, was she?
No, of course, she was elected as a
She was a
Tory,
Tory.
but coming in 2010, you might have expected her to be more on the sort of moderate side, because that's where the party had moved towards with Cameron leading it. But apparently has just moved all the way across. I mean, I don't trust her, but I trust that that's what she is planning to do. So we'll see.
Because tax cut seems to be her selling point as a candidate. She's going to say, cut taxes from day one was her campaign point. And, anyone who's anything about British politics knows that, you can't just cut taxes from day one. You can't do executive orders of your prime minister. This isn't the US. You've got to put legislation through Parliament. But at the same time, I'll give her the benefit of the doubt. She's going to put forward tax cuts from day one. Do you think that's going to be a winning strategy among the Tory membership?
Yes, I think so. I think the corporation tax rise in particular, which I suppose in that she can just scrap that from day one, because the corporation tax rise that Sunak has planned, I believe we're going up to maybe 25% corporation tax, as a way, as he said, as a way of covering the costs of COVID. That hasn't come in. It won't come in until 2023. So I suppose it kind of just to say it's not going to happen now kind of is within her gift. And I do think that specifically will be very popular with the membership and the donors, of course, because the donors are who really matter in the Conservative Party, and I think they'll probably be happy with that.
Yes, for context, of course, corporation tax is a tax on profits from corporations. So, like you say, it is probably going to be very popular among Conservative Party donors, especially the very ideological wings of the Conservative Party and the hard right, who are sort of, tax cuts come what may, even to the extent that some may be uncosted. Some of the very ideological wing might advocate for, on the belief that it will bolster growth. And, of course, it's a nuanced picture. Some tax cuts may bolster growth, but the question is where those tax cuts come.
Yeah.
And are we going to be seeing a cut in income tax for the lowest earners would be my chief concern. And are we going to see an end to that national insurance rise?
I think she has said that she will scrap the
That's what I'd be looking to.
Yeah, I think she has said that she will scrap the national insurance rise. It's a very canny move, is that she's basically saying, I'll undo the things that this person specifically, who I'm running against, has done. He can't really move on those things because it was him in office that did them.
And that's why he's now trying to present himself as a fiscal conservative and as a moderate, saying, I did what I did. People might not like me for it, but I'm doing the responsible thing. I'm taking the tough decisions. Yeah. That's the image he's trying to present. It's kind of like the sort of Cameron Osborne image is what he's going for.
But he is sort of caged in by the sort of long-winded austerity narrative, which you can't really do at the moment.
And austerity is what he's going for again. Let's be clear. No, tax
it will end up as austerity. Yeah, but it's hard to, you can't sell austerity anymore. So right now,
well, it depends. I think it's hard to sell austerity as cutting government spending. Yes. That's massively associated with the coalition. What I think Rishi, from the point of view of, look, I'm not pro-austerity to, at least to the end we're talking about here, but from the point of view of someone who would back his position, the game Rishi's playing is austerity via the means of tax rises.
Yeah.
And, that's something we've got to consider, because public spending cuts isn't the only way of achieving austerity. Tax rises are another one, especially tax rises that affect bottom earners. Yeah.
Which you got a lot of flack for over the national insurance, which it hasn't really, I mean, it's gone up, but then because they raised the threshold, I don't think anyone actually ends up paying any more now. But Truss is still planning to cut that back to what it was. So I guess you could say with this, because obviously it's still early days, they haven't really announced that much policy, but the policies that she has announced are scrap the corporation tax rise, appeals to the membership, appeals to the donors, scrap the national insurance rise, appeal to more of the general public.
Let's bring it back to basics. Who do you think's going to win?
I have been saying Truss will be the next leader of the Conservative Party for a while now, and I would probably say that that's still true. Just going off polling, I think YouGov did a poll after the final two were decided, and Truss is on at 62 and Sunak is on 38. So it's a big lead that she's already got going into this. And I do think his position as an incumbent, well, I mean, they're both incumbent members of government, but he's really, he's in 11 Downing Street. He's seen as...
He was until recently.
Well, yes, he was until a couple of weeks ago in 11 Downing Street. He's seen as, I think he's seen as far too linked to this government with the membership. So I would still say that I think Truss will win this. I also do think that she's hemmed him in with the policy announcements that she's got, because he can't really fight on them. He's got to defend. He's already on the back foot. If you're explaining, you're losing. I can't really see how he reshapes the narrative at this point. We've not got as long as what you would think. It's only about 6 weeks. And he's going to
September the 5th, we're due to hear the results. And, we're in late July now.
Yeah.
It's just over a lot, basically.
Yeah, I don't see where he pitches now.
What he's counting on, I think, is a sense of pragmatism from the Tory membership.
Yes.
That's the pitch he's making, is, as I've said already, he is trying to present himself as the fiscally responsible Conservative, while Truss is kind of more, in want of a better term, the ideologue on the table.
I guess they're both, I see them both as quite ideologue, though. I see Sunak as quite attached to...
Hence the term present themselves as.
Yeah, to like deficit spending. Yeah, I think we'll see if Sunak comes out more, because there is a sort of strong undercurrent that he can win an election, whereas she can't, based more broadly on personality than anything else. And I guess we'll see if he tacks more in that way.
Definitely. Rishi Sunak comes across as more polished than Liz Truss does.
Yeah.
If you watch the leadership debates at all, I've seen people calling out Liz Truss sort of, pointing like this when she's talking to Rishi Sunak, kind of almost in a sort of, didactic way, sort of,
yeah,
I'm telling you, this is how it's going to be. This is what it is, and that might appeal to certain people. I'm someone who myself very frequently criticize politicians who talk in that certain cadence and points at you like this. Yeah. And maybe Liz Truss might break that model. Who knows? And Rishi Sunak is certainly going for, what I just described there, being that very conventional, airbrushed politician.
Yeah.
Which is going to go down with the membership. And the membership is actually quite hard to gauge what the membership's like. They voted obviously for Boris Johnson by about just under 2/3 majority last time. At the same time, that was a contest that was so heavily dominated by Brexit. It's hard to really make a critical judgment of what the membership was thinking. It was a single issue election. Before that, Theresa May, Andrea Leadsom dropped out. The membership didn't get their say. The last time before that was David Cameron. That was in 2005. That's what, 17 years ago. Since the Conservative Party was actually properly voting for a clear direction on where they wanted their leader to be. So quite hard to judge what the membership is actually thinking.
It's quite hard to know as well what kind of people left the Conservative Party during that really unstable period between after the 2017 election, that really unstable period in politics, when the Conservative Party really was ripping itself apart. And there's, you did see a lot of people saying that they were leaving the Conservative Party because it had moved far away. And you actually did have, the MPs, the independent group Change UK, did actually have people breaking away, and it's hard. And
not just them, it was that 20 odd MPs who were expelled.
And I think there were others.
Your Rory Stewarts, your Oliver Letwins, your Soameses.
Yeah, and if you imagine that there are those people who the MPs are doing it, then there might, there's likely to be an exodus of more moderate Conservatives from the party as well. So that might indicate that the membership in general has moved to the right, and therefore the person presenting themselves as the right candidate, Liz Truss, might be more likely to win, unless they become a bit more pragmatic, unless they decide we need someone who can win an election. And if Rishi can present himself as that person who can win an election, can adequately point out, she can't win an election, here's how I would win an election, then there's potential for him to break through there, I think.
Let's come to that point then. Who should Labour fear more?
Yeah, like I said, I think they should fear... Well, there's arguments to be made for they could fear both. I was instinctively about to say they should fear Sunak more, because I think he'd be the politician to do things to get the public on side more. I think Liz Truss might be locking herself into an ideology quite prematurely when there is a big crisis. There is a cost of living crisis, and if one of them can see the country through it in a way that they can take credit for, then they can probably win an election off the back of that.
I think one problem that some are facing is dealing with the legacy of Thatcher, as it has been for pretty much every Conservative leader since, whether they've decided to overtly or implicitly say it. And Boris Johnson obviously managed to win over segments of the Red Wall at the last general election, in part because of Brexit, but also in part because of a promised change in direction for the Conservative Party. What I think a lot in the Conservative Party fail to understand is how toxic Thatcher still is in those Red Wall seats. How many of them saw, they thought, they hated Maggie, but they saw Boris's change. And if the likes of Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss are trying to tie themselves to the legacy of Thatcher, is that realignment going to stick?
No, I don't think it's going to stick either way. I can't see in an election scenario them gaining more ground in the Red Wall, for example, no matter what. In the Red Wall, I don't think that they've broken it, smashed it as much as what they think they have. So, for example, my home city of Coventry was polled, specifically Coventry, the 3 seats in Coventry were polled to see how, and they did all vote Labour, but 2 of them were incredibly marginal. They're the 2 most marginal seats in the country that Labour managed to win. Classically red wall, except they didn't actually vote Tory in the last election. And the polling now suggests, and this was specific to Coventry polling, that Labour will win all 3 of them by like huge margins. They're not making up any ground in those seats, and tying herself to Thatcher and an economic model which put a lot of people into poverty, ruined a lot of people's lives, still has a massive legacy across the north. I mean, it's not so much the case now, but during the 2015 election, someone posted a map showing coalfields in England and Labour seats in England, and they pretty much matched set for set. Now that has gone a little bit, but it's kind of still mainly the case. I don't see, I think as well, if they abandon this narrative of levelling up, I feel like that had more impact on what people think at the last election, because the sort of London-centric spending that comes out of the Treasury is very felt, and people
just think about how bigged up Crossrail was when that was opening.
Yeah, exactly. Even this year, you know, people are still thinking, when's ours?
Yeah, I mean, when's Northern Rail going to be fixed?
Yeah, when's the high-speed line, Northern Powerhouse Rail, or whatever you.
It's easy to say, you know, quite correctly, that Crossrail would likely bring a net benefit to the economy. At the same time, if you're not living in those direct benefits,
it's very easy to advocate for both.
How do you make that case politically? You know, you can't just be a nerd and cite off stats and figures. You've got to present a narrative.
Yeah, but I can't see either of these candidates committing to that as much, because I think one thing that Johnson liked was he did actually like a flashy infrastructure project, something that he could point to.
And I think there's a lot to be said for that. You know, where's the ambition that brought us the Channel Tunnel?
Yeah,
and that, you know, of the very few things I would give Boris Johnson credit for, and you know, as obviously logistically difficult as it was, the idea of building that bridge between Northern Ireland and Scotland, that's the sort of ambition we need.
Yeah,
it really is. You know, it's easy to dismiss it just because Boris Johnson said it, and there are obvious problems why it couldn't happen, and there's an entire podcast on why that is. At the same time, like I say, you know, we need to dream again.
Yeah. And it seems, you know, we'll see. If either candidate promises to properly cancel HS2, for example, that will probably be a big indication that then they can't bring themselves to commit to this idea of investing in these communities that have been let down for 40, 50, 60 years, you know, you could argue, for generations. That is how you win the red wall back. And I don't think any politician of a major party has a plan to fix it now, and I certainly don't think either of the Conservative candidates for Prime Minister do. They could cling on to power at an election scenario if they steer through this crisis well. I don't imagine they'd win a majority like this again, but there's a chance that they could retain, you know, those blue wall seats. The Lib Dems don't do very well, and they could retain enough marginal seats, because there are some traditional marginals in the red wall as well. If they maintain them, they could cling on to a majority, you know, circa 2015 Conservatives, you know, a very slim majority. But it seems, I see the path seems to be narrowing for me. The path to winning an election for the Conservative Party with these two candidates seems to be narrowing.
Seems to be very narrow for Labour too, doesn't it, though?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, hung parliament is probably what we're looking at.
I don't know how I feel about the SNP being kingmakers, but again, that's a topic for a whole other podcast.
Yeah.
One more point before we wrap up. what's going to be next for Boris Johnson? Because I feel he's going to want to be plotting a comeback. You know, if he doesn't, Boris Johnson, let's face it, is very self-indulgent. He's just looking out for his own interests. He could probably make a fortune outside of Parliament as, you know, an after-dinner speaker. If he doesn't resign his seat after September the 5th, I'm absolutely certain he's plotting a comeback.
Yeah, that has crossed my mind, and I think it's crossed a lot of people's minds. We'll see. I mean, you could see that the party, the scary people above them all, could ask him to leave. That wouldn't surprise me at all. And, you know, I'm sure that if they really want him gone and out of Parliament, which I think they, you know, probably should, they'll make it happen. And I'm sure he'll, because apparently he's broke. They'll offer him a lot of money. He'll get a really cushy job. It's just whether he can, he loves the limelight. He's been in the limelight for like 20 years now, which is a long time for a politician. Whether he can give it up to at least a certain degree remains to be
Imagine
seen.
if he runs for London mayor again in 24.
Well, that's one way to surefire sort of seal his fate, because I don't think the London morality is falling to the Conservatives at any point soon.
Well, possibly. I don't know. It depends on who they put up.
I've seen people say, what if he runs for New York mayor?
At any rate, that's all we have time for this evening. Thanks so much once again, everyone, for joining. Please remember, we are fundraising for Save the Children and the work they're doing to help Ukrainian refugees. Link in the description. Please donate generously. But once again, it's goodbye from me, goodbye from Tom, and we'll see you all next month. Bye for now.